Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dale Alexander, and we're excited to have you with us today. Finally, some sunshine. We've spoken for a while on this subject, and certainly you all realize we're coming down to the wire on this issue of IRS reporting. We'll be having more of these webinars probably each week, so look for our invites. There's a lot of interest, obviously, around this issue. Due to the numbers, we have you in listen-only mode. We'll take as many questions, by the way, as possible. You should see on your screen an area to type questions in. If we don't get to your question, we'll respond personally. So just don't forget, as always, our webinars are recorded to be accessed by you at future dates. And we'll give the address of where those webinars are at the end of our time together. So let's get to the content, and to share that with you, here's Travis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is doing great. Let me advance some slides here and get us going. Today, I guess just as a way to start the webinar today, just a quick recap. In some of our past webinars, we've covered things such as the basics of IRS reporting, practical examples of reporting codes, look back periods for initial employees and even ongoing employees and the differences between the two. So as we've done in the past, this is an evolution of kind of the next step of that. We also had a great conference at GASBO, and there were a lot of questions that came from that, a lot of interest. And so we wanted to give the benefit of what those questions were to the whole group. There was even a session by Harbin, Hartley, and Hawkins, and actually Corey and I had a chance to catch up a little bit yesterday. I know there is some uncertainty from his perspective and their law firm's perspective on certain things such as, do we use monthly method or look back? Are we self-funded or fully insured? And he and I will probably be getting in touch with each other again tomorrow, but I think there's some good questions that he's raised, and I know he is looking for some clarity with the Department of Community Health so he can advise his clients appropriately, and we certainly want to do the same. A couple other things that happened, and you'll see this as we go on today, is that there's been clarity from DCH regarding COBRA and retirees, that is something that the state is going to assume the liability for. So for those of you that were worried about COBRA and retirees, that's no longer on your plate of things to do. So that's certainly welcome news. But there'll be a few other announcements that we make along the way as we go through some of the content. But today what I thought we would do is just take one step back about why are we doing all this? What's the point? And so I want to just touch on the background for 30 seconds to a minute so you kind of understand the why before we get into the how. As we get into the how, we just want to talk about where's the data going to come from. We know that there are at least 3 different systems that this information can come from. It can come from payroll. It can come from time and attendance systems. It can also come from state health benefit plans. So how do we put all those pieces of the puzzle together to successfully get where we need to be? And so the end is really January 31st of 2016 is when these forms are due. And so it's important for us to be making some decisions quickly on how you're going to get this done and by which way. As we get to the reporting codes, I just want to show you on that part 2 of the form kind of what that is and what those mean. In previous webinars, we've given you practical examples. I think the big takeaway from today's webinar is that there's really no need to memorize codes or figure out which ones that you have to do on your own. There are actually systems that can do that for you. We'll just give you a sample of one of those today. Also, conversations about e-filing, a couple of PC Genesis breakout sessions at GASBO. If you're going to utilize PC Genesis, it's important to know what it can, and maybe more importantly, it cannot do. I'd like to give a lot of credit to the state for doing everything in their power through PC Genesis to try to assist schools, but I don't want you to be caught off guard with some of the limitations, one of which is they're not really helping you with e-filing. Another is they've made it clear that they can't help you with the reporting codes, and certainly understand why from their perspective. But to me, those are 2 very important and critical things that you want to have on your side as you move forward. And then lastly, many of you ask us, can you show us an overview of your system? And while we're going to show you our system, this is really the type of system you would want at all. These are the basic components of what should be important to you and what ultimately you should be expecting of any system. So with that said, let's dig into the background. There are really two things that are important when you're doing IRS reporting. One is, how are you fulfilling the requirements under the law, under the employer mandate, or the pay or play regulations? And the second is, what are we doing around the individual mandate, an individual's responsibility to secure coverage or else have access to a penalty that would show up at tax time. So that's really the whole point. There has been much discussion on, for example, substitute teachers. If they are working 30 hours, do we have to start offering them coverage? And the short answer to that is no. We'll get into more details later on. But this is simply to understand, for the purposes of subsidies on the marketplace or healthcare.gov, when you're selecting coverage, are people really eligible for subsidies or not? And are employers doing what they're supposed to do? That's really what this is all about. For many of you, these last two bullet points are easy because your plan with State Health Benefit Plan is on a calendar year basis. That makes it very easy and convenient that the reporting period is also calendar year, just like taxes. If I was to kind of sum up in one title, what is this stuff? Think of this as a W-2 for health insurance. This is just a one-page form you're going to be required to give to employees and around the same timeline. Going to one of the things that came up in GASBO and some of the things Corey and I discussed yesterday is a bit of the background of what forms go where. The gray section there to the left are the forms that go to employees and who files it. The pinkish section is the forms that go to the IRS and who does that. Across the top, you see three columns. The first assumes that you're fully insured more than 50, although I do know that there are RISAs that are less than that, versus what if we're self-funded 50 or more, versus what do we do for COBRA and retirees. And I do have that good news to share with you that COBRA and retirees, you can just eliminate the requirement for needing to do that. But I want to give you two different ways to look at whether you are a self-insured or fully insured plan. Just a couple things to think about before we do get clarity. Is your plan is a self-funded medical plan and you are a participating employer. So really the only differences that really come down to it for you are which parts of the form do you complete on 1095-C. Under a self-funded plan, you are responsible for parts 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to show you those today. The only difference if you are fully insured is you are not responsible for part 3. Part 3 meaning the covered dependents. So in my situation, it'd be my wife and children. That's the only difference. It doesn't change your obligations to have to do this. Doesn't change the fact that parts 1 and 2 are the exact same piece of information that you need to do. It's just you're alleviating your requirement for part 3. If you are considered fully insured, it just gives you one less thing to do. But when you see on this grid that the insurance company is responsible for doing something, what that means is to have successful compliance, you have to trust that State Health Benefit Plan is going to be sending this information on Part 3 with your covered dependents to the IRS for you. And given their position that they're not the responsible party for compliance, I'm not confident that that actually would happen. So the safest route would be to assume that you're self-funded. But we are hoping to learn more about what that means. We did get word from a few clients that there will be a call for non-PeopleSoft users on the Department of Community Health that will be this coming Monday at 10 a.m. Many of you may have already seen that information. If you haven't, I'm sure we could forward that on to you. But both Corey and I are certainly looking forward to hopefully getting some clarity on that very issue. But again, regardless of which one you are, you're still responsible for doing Part 1 and Part 2 regardless. Let's start digging through the 1095-C Part 1 form. This is the basic information that you'll be getting from your payroll system. I know many of you have expressed anxiety that sometimes the information in ADP is not accurate and may not be up to date, but many of you have said we trust payroll. We know what our employees have told us. We know what we've coded in there. And so all this information can be taken from that. The first 1 through 6 lines are just information about the employee, their social, address, city, state, zip. That's going to be different for obviously each employee. The second section, or the third box at the end, is the applicable large employer or your school district's information on numbers 7 through 13. This will be the same information on every single form. You do it one time, it will be the same each time. Name of your employer, city, state, zip, EIN, etc. That's the easy part. Moving on to part 2. This to me is the biggest differences in terms of technology solutions. When somebody says, I've got something that can help you, we got this, it's important to know what those details are in terms of what they are or are not doing for you. I'll give you an example. I use PC Genesis. PC Genesis is in a position to allow you the mechanism by which you can choose these codes yourself, and they can absolutely populate the forms for you. But to me, how do you know which codes to use? We've taught you some practical examples in the past, but that's not every possible situation. You have new hires where they may only come in mid-year and things change. So in line 14, what you see are the Series 1 codes, and you have codes from 1A to 1I. Line 15 is, and by the way, I'm sorry, line 14 is what type of offer of coverage are you doing? Many of you have heard us say that you should qualify for the federal poverty level safe harbor. So in that instance, that would be 1A there for some of your employees. Line 15, depending on which safe harbor you use, either is left blank or you would put the employee share of the lowest cost monthly premium for self-only coverage on minimum value. So for most of you, that's going to be the HSA plan, but let's just say that it didn't meet the minimum value thresholds. Even your HRA bronze plan would work there at $66.28. So you're fine there. So Stay Health Benefit Plan has done a good job of making sure your plan is qualified and affordable for the people it needs to be. So that greatly simplifies your responsibility. Line 16 basically says is which safe harbor code are you going to utilize? So if I am offered coverage in line 14, what am I doing with that offer of coverage on line 16? Am I taking coverage, as an example 2C, or am I not taking coverage and you leave it blank? So there are a number of systems that can auto adjudicate the correct codes with some basic information that we will show you today, whether it's our system or somebody else's. There are systems that can make this easy on you. I would strongly encourage you to find a system that can do that. I think manually doing these codes could present some tax issues. If an employee got a form that was not filled out correctly, you will be the ones getting the phone calls that say, hey, something came up at tax time and I'm not sure this code is correct, and can you fix that for me? So just know that you don't have to do that. A great example that Dale Alexander used the other day was, do you remember when short-term disability, when you used to enroll via paper, and the insurance companies would teach you on the bottom of the paper how to calculate your disability premiums? You take the age, you'd find your age band, you'd find your rate, you'd take it times whatever your weekly salary is, you'd divide it by a formula, and that would just tell you whatever your premiums are. But then you had all these different benefit levels, whether it be 40, 50, 60% of your salary. So it just became very complicated for employees to do. And with benefits technology, you simply just have all the rules built in the system in the setup initially, and all people see is what they're eligible for and exactly what their benefits are and how much it costs. Think of Part 2 on the 1095-C just like that. You have the basic information on a setup that tells you exactly what those codes will be, so you don't have to rely on doing this yourself. It's not necessary. Sub-teachers are on the minds of many of you. I need to define this more accurately as a variable hour employee, but for many of you, the only folks that fall under the state's temporary employee status are going to be people like substitute teachers, sub-bus drivers, sub-food service, mostly subs. That is not an all-inclusive, but that's primarily it. If we use sub-teacher as an example, which many of you are concerned with, here's the thing to keep in mind. Even though you have to use a system to track, whether it be month to month or look back periods, whichever calculation you do, you are only supposed to provide a 1095-C if an employee is considered full-time, which is defined as one that's working on average 30 hours a week. Okay? So anybody that's 30 hours a week, that's a substitute, which really should be very few. Whether they are enrolled in coverage or whether you did not offer it and they just simply waived coverage, You are responsible if they exceed 30 hours per week on average to do that. So one of the things that I know was discussed at GASBO is, well, what do we use? Do we use a month-to-month method, or do we use the look back? Many of you are familiar with our prior webinars where we have proposed the look back period primarily for the instance that you have dozens, if not hundreds, of substitute teachers or variable hour employees. And so their hours are constantly fluctuating. Under a look back period, you get to average someone's hours to figure out if they're 30 hours on a 12-month period. Under month to month, you don't. You don't have to worry about looking back and doing the data entry to look at that information, but you're looking at it from a month-to-month basis. So let me give you just a couple different ways to think through that. If you had a long-term sub for someone that had a pregnancy leave for 2 months, let's say it's January and February, if they truly were exceeding 130 hours per month, which is 30 hours a week, 30 hours a week times 4.33 weeks is 130 a month. If that sub exceeded 130 hours per month, then you're going to have to check for the months of January and February that they were full-time. And you're going to have to decide what codes they're supposed to be given. And there's a potential penalty, because I don't think that you will be offering them coverage, of $250 per month. Under the look-back period, you're going to average that over, let's say, a 12-month period of time. And from our analysis on dozens of schools, it just does not appear that you're going to have a long-term sub that's going to be working consistently 130 hours a month. So while the penalty might be up to $3,000, the odds of it actually coming into effect are quite small. In fact, I'd say the penalty under either method. Regardless of what legal counsel gives you, know that we can handle either situation. There's pros and cons of doing both. And just know that it's up to you on how you want to do it. Last thing I would finish with sub-teachers is a misconception that we've outsourced those employees or any other type of employee to another entity, for example, Kelly Services. You want to be very careful when you're negotiating your contracts that you have the proper language in that contract and an awareness that that is 100% their responsibility and the contract terms are written in the right way. Because under the Affordable Care Act, if they are considered to be a common law employee, that could still be your responsibility. I don't want to proclaim to be a legal scholar on common law employees. I can give you the generalities, but whether you're using the services of Harbin, Hartley & Hawkins or a labor attorney or someone else, I would encourage you to, if you fall in that situation, to make sure that you are looking into that thoroughly. Let's go on to part 3. Again, part 3 is the only part of the form that is due if you are self-funded. And I'll walk you through if you are considered self-funded. At this point, I believe the safe route is that you are. We hope to get clarity soon. If you were to fill out part 3 and you are self-funded, that information only resides in one place, and that's ADP system, via State Health Benefit Plan. So I am hopeful on Monday's conference call that you will get some awareness on what the reports are. I've even heard from some of you that some reports are available, but it doesn't give all the right information. So I'm really hoping to get clarity over what they are and are not going to be doing to assist you. I've also encouraged, and I know many of you have taken us up on this, to send a letter to State Health Benefit Plan by certified mail and email it to them as well, saying, you know, we're concerned that we don't have the ability to complete all of this information because we're reliant on you for some of it. And so can you please let us know what you are or will not be doing so we can plan appropriately? So if you have not done that, I encourage you to. If you want to wait till after Monday, that would make sense as well. But I do think you need to know and document in your HR files and finance files what you have done for what is really all that matters, good faith compliance in 2015. Part 3, as an example, if we were to use my personal family situation, I would have my wife Sally on line 17 as my spouse with her social and what month she was covered. My son Liam and my daughter Chloe would be on 18 and 19 with their social and or date of birth if the social is not available, and their covered months. But that's really all there is to the forms themselves in terms of completing them. How do you manage this? The first 2 bullets are what I would pay probably closest attention to, and I can actually now, Dale, with the information we got, take the question mark off DOE on bullet 3. But under the first bullet point, you need to complete a 1095-C for any and all employees that are working 30 hours a week or more, whether they enroll or waive coverage. There must be a positive or negative election, and that's what happens with the reporting codes, is that they'll know. The bullet point 2, our interpretation of the law, and this is one of the things I was hoping to discuss with Corey, hopefully we'll get a chance to do that tomorrow, is we believe in our interpretation of the law is that you must complete 1095-C also for enrolled employees that might be working less than 30 hours a week. So I'll give you an example. On a prior webinar, before the final guidance was out, we said if anybody is eligible for coverage, regardless of their hours, you need to make a positive or negative election for them. Our interpretation now of the law, which has changed with final regulations on the bullet point 2, is that if you have a bus driver working 25 hours a week who is eligible for coverage, which they are, and enrolls in coverage, which the vast majority do, then you must provide a 1095-C to that bus driver. Let's look at it a different way. That same bus driver working 25 hours on average a week does not enroll in benefits. You would not be responsible for that form. The third bullet point is what we just talked about before, and we can take off the question mark now, is that there's no need to complete 1095-Bs for COBRA and retirees. That is now something that will be done through the bidding process that the state did for an ACA vendor. At the end of the day, as strongly as I can encourage you to consider this, I believe you're going to need and want, based on your resources and capabilities, an electronic system. It could come in many shapes and sizes. We'll just give you a couple things to think about. That might be your payroll system like PC Genesis. But if you're using PC Genesis, there are limitations. They can't do the reporting codes. They're not going to e-file. So just know what you're getting when you go that direction. There are other Munis and others that are out there that can do things for you. There are benefits and enrollment software solutions that can do some of this. And there are third-party systems like the one we'll show you today. Third-party from our perspective is necessary because you have all these different entities where data sets have to come from that you want to get in one common place so this can be automated as quickly as possible. Let us walk through an example of how you'd pay for this and what it would cost, because I know everybody wants to know the answer to that. And just using an example, I know the Department of Community Health sent out a survey question maybe a Monday, 2 ago on what their sample pricing would be. If you had a 1,000 employee example and you went with a direct provider, which is that darker red section at the top, you're going to be looking at, depending on whether you're signing a 1, 2, or 3-year contract, somewhere between $14,000 to $17,000 on average is what we have found for systems. Now, from a product quality standpoint, they're selling you a quality product, so there's really no impact to the quality of your insurance benefits. So you're buying a IRS reporting tool, and that would be the cost. The only difference between that column and the one just to the right on advisor supported would be something like our model. Based on our scale and leverage and the amount of clients that we have, we're able to get the same exact thing for a much lower price point just due to how many clients we have on that across the country. And so the same exact type of system doing the same exact things is going to cost half as much money. And again, there's no impact to the product or quality. Insurance companies, the third column, are also offering solutions, and in some cases at no cost, depending on if you buy their products and services. One thing I would just make you aware of is, as you are looking at something that doesn't cost you any money, are you offering insurance benefits that are of the highest quality and lowest cost? Are they rich benefits at the lowest possible price point that you can get them for? I know, as an example, Dale takes all of their clients through a selection day and a design class where they really break down all the components. So just be aware that you're getting the best out there. And then lastly, some of you that participated in the shared savings program with us are paying a subsidized cost, if not zero cost, for the program based on the shared savings program that we rolled out. This would be available to others at next year's open enrollment with State Health. And that provides an opportunity to save money for both employees and the district as well. So those are the various types of ways you can do it. At the end of the day, these 5 things to me are what I would be concerned with if I was a finance director, in HR, payroll, or benefits, looking to solve this problem, and something that has to be solved with not a lot of work weeks left in the year. With Christmas break and Thanksgiving, there's just not a lot of time left. So at the end of the day, I just want that form populated. Can you just give me the 1094 cover letter and the 1095 that they are just print ready? I need the whole thing to just be done. I need to make sure that the reporting codes, bullet point 2, that lines 14 and 16 are auto-generated just based on the information from the system. That number 3, this is just going to be transmitted and filed to the IRS correctly, which has to be done electronically for the vast majority of districts, over 250 employees, if you will. Point number 4, does it have the ability to do monthly method or look-back periods? If I wanted to use look-back periods, is the system set up correctly with educational institutions to track our variable hour employees like substitutes and tell us, and we'll show you a dashboard, who's on pace to be full-time, who's not, who's going to get a 1095C, who's not. And then lastly, I think it's very important that you understand and work with a dedicated healthcare advisor that knows Georgia schools, that understands how State Health Benefit Plan works, who understands PC Genesis and the other systems that you all are working with to fulfill these obligations. And so I'm going to spend one more slide, and then I'm going to get to the actual demo of the system. And I'm just going to walk you through our system, but really this should be kind of the basis of what any good system would look like for you in terms of the type of information you're going to have to collect, and then what these dashboards and ultimately the forms will look like. So the first thing is the setup. Second thing is the data, which is the heavy lifting on your end. Lastly, third thing would be tracking, which is how do you look at different people in terms of are they part-time, full-time, variable hour, and then lastly the forms themselves. So if you give me just 1 second, I'm going to escape from the PowerPoint for just a second. I am going to pull open our system. We're going to log in real quick. Each of you would have a login and password regardless of what system you're using. I'm actually going to go to reporting. I'm going to pull a sample client. And so there are the 4 blocks that we will go through. The first is the setup. From our perspective, you would do some type of implementation call. Ours is about 30 to 45 minutes. Where we're going to, and once you set it up for one Georgia school, from our perspective, it's the same each time. The only things that really would be different is if you wanted to change monthly method versus look back, and those are just quick decisions to change. But you get an ID. You need a system that can handle variable hour employees because you have them, so that needs to be yes. What is your pay frequency monthly? Has the government, for planning purposes on seeing if people are eligible for Medicaid, if you will, is it 100% or 133% of the federal poverty level? Well, in Georgia, it's 133. What safe harbor, if any, are you available for? In this case, you are set up for the federal poverty level safe harbor because State Health has made your plans affordable and qualified. If you have variable hour employees, is a variable hour employee considered new after 13 weeks? Well, the answer is no, because educational institution can use a 26-week parity period. And just 2 more screens on setup. This is just one example of, let's say, the HRA Silver plan for 2015. Your plan is self-funded. If it wasn't, we just change it to fully insured. You put in the employee's cost for coverage, and then the plan design actuarial value, which anything above 60% actuarial value, which is defined as dollars out in claims versus revenues received, if you will. An actuarial value, anything north of 60% passes the test. All of your plans are going to be in that position. Then the last step is just simply going through the look back and stability periods. Many of you have seen this on prior webinars where you have one for new employees and you concurrently have to track one for ongoing employees. And so these are the dates that we've talked about in our webinars. But once that is done, you save the configuration, and that quickly the system is set up. The next thing, where the vast majority of the heavy lifting occurs, is the data. You hit data and you download an Excel template. and you're going to download it, you're going to complete it, and then you're simply going to upload it. And that's going to happen if you want to do this every month to really take advantage of the workforce tracking tools of the system. You can do that. If you just want to do this once a year because you don't want to fool with it, you could do that as well. Most districts are going to do this on a monthly basis for the workforce management tracking for subs. If you chose a monthly method, you may not do that. So I'll just show you an example because this is what's on most of your minds. Is Travis, would you please just make this more visible for me so I can figure out what we have to do and who we have to get involved and where things are going to come from. So there's a little dictionary that just tells people on the spreadsheet, because anytime you're working with software tools, you have to do things in a particular format so it doesn't error out in the system. So this just tells you how to do that. But this is really where the heavy lifting becomes into play. So company code is just auto-assigned by whatever system you have. I like, from an employee ID perspective, to be the same as a social in case you ever needed to do a VLOOKUP or cross-reference multiple systems. Your last name, your first name, your social, address, city, state, and zip. You're probably saying, wow, this looks familiar. That's all in the first part of the form. Then you have different drop-down categories of people where you're considered, people that are full-time, like finance directors, HR, teachers. You're already full-time. But you may also want to, you don't have to, but you may also want to track part-time and seasonal people. You may want to track all of your employees so you know, are we offering coverage to the right people? And we want to use the workforce management tools that this can do. But primarily, it's going to be tracking variable hour and full-time for the most part. So in this example, and I'll just use the first two, the first person is a full-time employee. If you're using the look-back period, everybody is designed to have that measurement period we just looked at on the last setup screen. So you'll look at their date of hire. If it applied, you'd look at their date of termination or rehire date. In this instance, it doesn't matter. You'll talk about which plans they're enrolled in, and we would have all the plans built here. This is just a simple illustration. When were they enrolled in coverage? Was it 10/1 of 2002 all the way to current? And what plans did they have? So single, spouse, child, family. All of your payroll systems, although they don't do it in this exact format, have the ability to export all of this information and do just this. So export in Excel, realign the columns. Yes, on PC Genesis, you're taking a legend of codes and you're converting that to actual names, but that's not too difficult. I think the time and attendance piece, if you will, or the thing that's the workforce management tracking and what some people have and some people have not been doing, is tracking hours worked by month and then rate of pay. If you're using the federal poverty level safe harbor, there's no need for the hourly rate of pay, but that's not always the best way to do it. So the system does ask for your hourly rate of pay. If you're salaried, you simply just do a basic conversion of your salary divided into an hourly rate. And also, when you're full-time, your hours worked are pretty easy. Anything north of 130 hours in the system is going to default you to full-time. So in this case, this individual for the months of January are working 175 hours, $15 an hour. So every single month, February, March, April, May, every single month, you're going to see that the data is exactly the same. Now, what happens if they're a variable hour employee? Well, you're going to just do a drop down for variable hour employee. And then you're going to look over here, and they're waiving coverage because they don't have it. So there's no enrollment to have there. And the plan enrollment date is just simply left blank because there is no enrollment date. Plan tier is also left blank. And so for your sub-teachers, as an example, what's their hourly rate? And many of you do this on a per diem basis, so you just would translate that to an hourly rate. Many of you may also be saying, well, we don't track hours, Travis, so how do we get to hours? Going back to some prior webinars, you're just going to have to convert whatever they have into hours worked to take advantage of a look-back period. Actually, you're going to have to convert it to hours worked if you use month to month, because you have to have that information month over month to see if the form is filled out correctly. So let's say a per diem is paid a full day, you'd give that person 8 hours of credit. If your policies and procedures and employment contracts say a half a day is worth 4 hours, then I think you have a good argument that you can just say half a day of pay is worth 4 hours and a full day of pay is worth 8 hours. You're just giving the benefit of the doubt to the employee. So in this particular example, in January, it's 20 hours, $8 an hour. 25 hours for February, 40 hours for March, et cetera, et cetera. If you have the ability to just focus your efforts and resources on building out this Excel file, everything else in the system auto-adjudicates for you, and everything gets completed up through part 2 on the spreadsheet. So that's what you're going to do in terms of data and what it would look like. The only thing we did not cover, which is at the end, is part 3, which again, at the bottom of the tab here, covered individuals. We used employee ID before because you have to translate that covered individual back to the actual employee ID. So you're going to be including, there's, if you will, Susan Williams, which is the spouse, her covered Social Security number, her social. If you don't have social, you can use date of birth, and then when she was enrolled in coverage. This particular person, there's the employee 444, and there's Allison and there's Amy. So those are 2 covered dependents. There's their socials, there's where they're covered. That would need to be done from State Health. They would have to export that or give you that reporting capability from their system, and then you could simply copy and paste that into the system. If you're able to do all of these things, IRS reporting is made simple. I'm going to go back to the system. And once you do the data and you get that spreadsheet, you upload it. Then you have the ability to start tracking. And I want to go through some of the workforce management piece of this, which I think is valuable. Who do we have that might be Medicaid eligible? How many people are enrolled? How many people are waived? How many potential people are eligible for the exchanges themselves? And so you have not full-time employees here. You have full-time employees over here, and there are decision trees. If you're full-time, did you offer them coverage? Well, yes, you did. All 3 are over here, not offered. Are they eligible for any type of penalty based on offering them coverage but not being affordable? No. Everybody in Georgia will be here. And then they're either enrolled or waived. The other side of this would be tracking part-timers, variable hour, and seasonal, if you wanted to do that. So for variable hour employees, many of you might have a superintendent or a board member say, hey, I need to know how many variable hour people we have and who is likely to be full-time. Well, 0. So nothing shows up. Little dashboard there. But you also have the ability to click on that same box here and say variable employees who is unlikely to be full-time. Therefore, no 1095-C, nothing to worry about. There they are. You're probably going to know them by name. So that's just some of the advantage of the workforce tracking piece of the tool. And then lastly, and I'm not going to be able to do it today because we don't have data through December 31st, but once you have data through December 31st on elections, you're going to click the forms. And forms is really going to do 2 things. When you're ready by delivering no later than January 31st, the 1095-C to employees, you will click a button, and in 24 hours, in the case of this system, it auto-populates a completely filled out 1095-C for each impacted individual. You're not ordering card stock or ordering forms and paper that I've heard other people talk about. The forms are completed on your behalf completely. Then, no later than March 31st, you will hit the e-file button, just like you do with your taxes if you e-file. You're going to click an e-file. You're going to acknowledge that it's ready to go. And the system is already set up. You're not having to set up a different tax ID or set up anything different. You're just going to simply e-file everything you need to the IRS right from a system. So I just wanted to give you more of a practical example of what this looks like. I know many of you think that this is kind of an orphan idea and it's hard to kind of relate to what things are going to look like. And hopefully this gives you a better sense of what a good system might look like and what it can do for you. I'm going to ask Dale to come back up. We are going to have time because I already see questions coming in. We are going to leave time for questions. So let me actually turn things over to Dale, and we'll take questions right after that.
It's funny. We have a client, a dear lady who finished loading her data in yesterday, as Travis had just instructed her, and she's just about done with all of her data for the year. And she sent an email to us yesterday and said, I'm just going to read it. It said, Travis, I've actually now uploaded and executed through October and working on December data. She says, I'm psyched. I was literally dancing, which I don't do and no one has ever seen. And that was only after I'd gotten January and February uploaded. So with October completed, I now stand at 99.6% compliance, if I remember correctly. That's and if you know her, this is too funny seeing her dancing. So, Travis, you want to go to the questions?
Yeah.
Just pull some of those up.
Yep. While I'm doing that, I also wanted to let folks know that all of you belong to a RESA. Either you're in the RESA itself or you are working for the RESA. This started maybe a month or so ago where a couple of RESA directors said, hey, if we have enough schools like you've done for us with different things in the past, would you give us a price break if we had a number of school districts join in? And so the answer was absolutely. And so if you haven't heard from your RESA director, you can reach out to them. We gave the blessing at GASBO when the RESA directors got together because we were asked if they could share the pricing we had done for a couple of them. And could we just make that offer available to everybody? And so we said, certainly. And so we would acknowledge that for any RESA that wants to have that, we would absolutely do that. Let me just look through a couple of the questions. And I can also share with you from our morning session today, maybe some questions that came up. One of which is, what if we have less than 50 employees, Travis? What do we do? If you have less than 50 employees, which is only going to be a couple of the RESAs themselves, if you have less than 50 employees and you are self-funded, which at this point I believe that's the safest route, then you are responsible for completing forms. Now it is a different form number, but it's going to look and feel just like what we talked about today. If you are less than 50 employees and you are fully insured, you have no obligations to report in anything from an IRS reporting perspective. So it does help us to know whether someone is fully insured or self-funded. Again, the other thing is most of you on this call, and the vast majority of all districts are over 50 anyways. So the only difference that means to you, going back to what we talked about earlier, the only difference is that you either are or are not responsible for completing Part 3, which is simply your covered dependents. You still have an obligation to complete these forms, turn them into your employees, and providing them to the IRS. There was a question, hey, can you send us the webinar information for DCH on Monday at 10 a.m.? We just sent that out, and so if you have not gotten a copy, just let us know. We'll resend it to you. I can't tell you anything other than what the information that was shared with us. It is supposed to be about the Affordable Care Act and eligibility, and I anticipate what they're going to do around that. Look at another question, and one that also came, hey, can you repeat what DCH is handling, because I joined the call late. It's important to know that what's just been announced and shared to me by other school districts is back in mid-September, the state has notified schools that they are confirmed to take care of your COBRA participants and your retirees. You were really not in a position to do that, so it's nice to know that that's just one less thing to worry about. I would take that email, I would put that in your HR file, and I think you're good to go. I would anticipate hearing something back from Corey soon. I know he's tried to reach out to the state to get clarity for several of his clients on things. I'm hoping to get some clarity, talking with him tomorrow as well, but just stay tuned. We'll be doing more communication. One more question is, let me read this. Is the cost to input or use of software only? If you're asking our question, we could certainly talk more specific to you. I could generally just share with you that we have mastered this process at this point, knowing how to quickly and efficiently do this. We set up an implementation or a kickoff call where we do the setup and we show you how to download. Certainly what we can't do is enter your data for you. So we provide the framework, the advice, the support, the ability to troubleshoot, but you're going to have to get the information, at least with our system, into that format, which I can tell you is not difficult because I already know people have done it and they said it was not difficult. You're simply getting your spreadsheets in order and copying and pasting that into this spreadsheet. That is not to diminish the amount of time and effort and resources that you have to put in it at all, because I know it takes time to track hours worked, but our system is set up to go through that process with you, to have the intellectual ability of our healthcare advisors to work with you, the experience of working with other schools, and then take care of all the forms being printed. You would have to distribute the forms, but you would under any situation. But then our cost also pays for e-filing as well. So if that didn't answer your question, or if that was not enough, just reach out to me with my contact information right there. We have 450 employees with one payroll person. Input is virtually impossible. Any suggestions? Wow, I can't tell you how many times I've heard of just the lack of resources for schools and how we want to be there for districts. This is the most efficient process by which we have been able to create a successful and a quick implementation. By that, it doesn't matter what system you use. Most of your people are going to be full-time. So you're going to be entering that information on the spreadsheet the same way. You're not going to have a tremendous amount of people to go back and look at variable hours with a school district of that size. So the fluctuating hours really won't be that big a deal. Again, if you want to call me offline, I'd be happy to share some suggestions. But we certainly know you're trying to do more and more with less and less resources. So I just know that if you don't have a system like this, that will be even harder.
Essentially, the lady that made this comment has a system about that size, and she learned how to upload the information in, load it, and it really wasn't that difficult for her, if that makes you feel any better. Thank you, Travis. And folks, we're thankful for your attendance. We appreciate your time. Remember, these webinars are recorded. We have our last 5 webinars online. You can go to cafe125.com/webinars. That's cafe125.com/webinars. And we'll have this webinar actually posted probably Monday. The reason that we do these is that it requires no travel, and we just try to make these things convenient for you and easy, and also, again, record them so that you can go back and listen and watch all of our prior content that we have. Just one note, please make a decision soon on this. However you're going to handle this issue, try to have your solution in place. Whoever you use, whether it was us or some other system, try and have that solution in place by the Thanksgiving break. Should you need any assistance, guidance, sit and share a cup of coffee over this topic, just give us a call and we'll be happy to talk to you through this and help you get some answers. We truly appreciate each of you, and thank you for being with us, and we'll see you soon. Take care.